"What the hell are you doing, boy?" Harold's voice cut through the frozen tableau, equal parts pain and outrage. Jason stared in horror at his father, then at his own fist, as if the appendage had betrayed him. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You come into my house and start swinging?" Harold pressed a hand to his reddening cheek. "Have you lost your mind?" "I thought—" Jason looked at Zaph, confusion giving way to embarrassment. "Ted's my friend. He called me, told me Sue was staying here with him." He jerked his chin towards Zaph. "Said he broke up their marriage." "Ted put himself in jail," Sue snapped, moving to examine her father's face. "He threatened me with a knife, Jason. A knife. Your friend could have killed me." Jason's anger deflated, reality intruding on whatever narrative Ted had fed him over the phone. "He did what?" "Ted wouldn't. He's not violent." "He is now," Sue said flatly. "There's a restraining order, police reports, the works. You can read them if you don't believe me." Elaine appeared in the doorway, alerted by the commotion. Her eyes widened at the sight of her husband's bruised face. "What on earth?" "A misunderstanding," Harold said, waving away her concern. "Jason got some bad information." The evening that followed was tense, conversation stilted and sparse. Jason avoided Zaph's gaze, shame and lingering suspicion battling across his features. After dinner, he cornered Zaph on the back porch, his posture less aggressive but no less wary. "I owe you an apology," he began stiffly. "What I tried to do, it was out of line." Zaph nodded, accepting the olive branch despite its reluctant offering. "You were looking out for your sister. I get it." Jason studied him, trying to reconcile the gentle-voiced young man before him with the homewrecker Ted had described. "Ted said, he said you planned it all, getting close to them, turning Sue against him. And you believed him." It wasn't a question. "He's my friend, has been since high school." Jason looked away, gaze tracking the movement of fireflies in the gathering dusk. "But what Sue said about the knife, that doesn't sound like the Ted I know." "People change," Zaph offered, careful to keep judgment from his tone. "Stress affects everyone differently." Jason nodded slowly. "I guess. It's just, I've known him a long time. Never seen him lose control like that. There's a first time for everything." Zaph hesitated, then decided to press his advantage. "Did he mention that he and Sue have an open marriage? That they invited me and my wife to participate?" Jason's head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. "What?" "No, he didn't say anything about—" He stopped, recalibration happening behind his eyes. "Your wife. Ex-wife now. Mary." Zaph allowed a hint of bitterness to enter his voice. "She got too attached to Ted. Things got complicated." Understanding dawned on Jason's face, pieces falling into place to form a picture very different from the one Ted had painted. "So you and Sue, it wasn't just—" "It's not what Ted told you," Zaph confirmed. "But I don't blame you for believing him. He's your friend. You wanted to protect your sister from what you thought was a threat." The tension between them eased, not entirely dissipated, but reduced to manageable levels. When Jason extended his hand again, his right hand this time, Zaph accepted it without hesitation. "Sorry again about, you know," Jason gestured vaguely toward the house, where his father was nursing his bruised face with an ice pack. "No harm done," Zaph assured him, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Later that night, as the household settled into sleep, Zaph reflected on the encounter. Jason's arrival had been an unexpected complication, but one that had ultimately strengthened his position within the Wheeler family. The attempted assault, the revelation of Ted's selective storytelling, even the accidental injury to Harold, all had worked in Zaph's favor, casting him as the reasonable party, the one who maintained composure while others lost control. It was going almost too well, he thought as he drifted toward sleep. The universe rarely gifted such perfect circumstances without eventually demanding payment. The question was, what would the cost be, and when would the bill come due? The answer arrived sooner than expected, in the form of a phone call that shattered the relative peace they'd established. Sue received it early one morning, Ted somehow having obtained the Wheelers' number despite the restraining order. Zaph watched her face drain of color as she listened, her knuckles whitening around the receiver. "You can't," she began, then fell silent, listening again. "No, Ted, that's not." Another pause. "Stop calling here. I mean it." She hung up with shaking hands, turning to find Zaph watching from the doorway. "What did he want?" Zaph asked, though he had a fair idea based on her reaction. "He's out of jail." Sue's voice was flat, drained of emotion. "The restraining order is in place, but he said he's coming here, that he needs to explain things to my parents, to Jason." "He can't come within 500 feet of you," Zaph reminded her. "That's the law." "Since when has the law stopped anyone determined enough?" Sue's laugh held no humor. "You don't know Ted when he's fixated on something. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." The statement contained more truth than she realized. Ted's fixation had been a key component in Zaph's plan from the beginning. His attachment to Mary, his possessiveness towards Sue, those qualities had made him vulnerable to manipulation, easy to push into increasingly irrational behavior. Now those same qualities made him unpredictable, dangerous. "We should tell your parents," Zaph said, already calculating possibilities, contingencies. "And Jason, they need to be prepared." Sue nodded, resignation settling over her features like a funeral shroud. "It was too good to last, wasn't it? This peace we found here." Zaph touched her arm gently. "Hey, nothing's changed. He can't hurt you here." She looked up at him, eyes searching his face for the confidence her own lacked. "Promise?" "I promise," he said, meaning it despite the uncertainty churning in his gut. Whatever happened next, he would protect her, not just because she was integral to his revenge, but because somewhere along the way she had become important in ways he hadn't anticipated. That evening, they gathered in the living room for a family council of sorts. Harold and Elaine sat side by side on the sofa, their postures reflecting decades of weathering hardships together. Jason occupied a wooden chair near the window, positioned to watch the driveway. Conscious or unconscious, the placement spoke volumes about his protective instincts. Sue perched on the arm of Zaph's chair, her proximity a silent declaration of allegiance. "Ted's made threats," Zaph explained, keeping his voice level, informative rather than alarming. "Nothing specific, but concerning enough that we wanted everyone to be aware." "What kind of threats?" Harold's question was direct, practical. Sue twisted her hands in her lap. "He said he's coming here, that he needs to talk to all of you, to tell you the truth about what happened." "And what is the truth?" Elaine asked quietly, her gaze moving between her daughter and Zaph. The question hung in the air, laden with implications that extended far beyond Ted's version of events. What was the truth? That Ted and Sue had invited Zaph and Mary into their bed? That Zaph had systematically dismantled their marriage as revenge for that night? That Sue had fallen under his influence, turning against her husband at his direction? None of those truths could be spoken aloud, not in this room, not to these people who saw the world in simpler, more binary terms. "The truth is that Ted became violent," Zaph said finally, "that he threatened Sue with a knife, that a court found his behavior dangerous enough to issue a restraining order. The rest, the why of it all, doesn't really matter right now." Harold nodded, accepting the simplified narrative. "If he shows up here, we call the sheriff. Simple as that." "And if he shows up with that knife again?" Jason's voice was tight with tension. "Sheriff's office is 20 minutes out minimum." "Then we handle it," Harold said firmly. "This is our home. We protect our own." The declaration was met with solemn nods all around, a family united against an external threat. Zaph felt a strange warmth at being included in that circle of protection. Even as a part of him recognized the irony of the situation. They were preparing to defend against a danger he had helped create, rallying around someone who had orchestrated the very crisis they now faced. Later that night, unable to sleep, Zaph stood at the living room window watching the moon cast long shadows across the farmyard. The windmill creaked its endless lament, a mechanical voice counting seconds that stretched into minutes, hours. Sue found him there, wrapping her arms around him from behind, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. "You should sleep," she murmured. So should you. He felt her shrug against his back. Can't. Too wound up thinking about Ted, what he might do. Zaph turned to face her, studying her features in the muted moonlight. Whatever happens, we'll handle it, together. She nodded, but doubt lingered in her eyes. I keep thinking about that night, how fast everything changed. 1 minute we were having dinner, and the next, she shuddered. I never saw it coming. Never thought Ted could be like that. The guilt that Zaph had been holding at bay crept closer, whispering uncomfortable truths. He had seen it coming. He had engineered it, step by careful step, pushing Ted toward that breaking point with calculated precision. People surprise us, he said, the platitude tasting like ash in his mouth. Not always in good ways. Sue reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the contours of his jaw with a tenderness that made his chest ache. You've been my anchor through all this. I don't know what I would have done without you. The truth hovered on Zaph's tongue, the full, unvarnished truth of his motivations, his manipulations, his cold-blooded revenge. For a wild moment, he considered confessing everything, laying his sins bare and accepting whatever judgment followed. Instead, he kissed her, the act simultaneously genuine and evasive. Some truths were better left unspoken, buried in the graveyard of good intentions where they belonged. Outside, the windmill continued its creaking rotation, counting down to a confrontation that felt increasingly inevitable. Somewhere in the darkness, Ted was planning his move, drawing ever closer to a reckoning that would force everyone's hands. Closer to a reckoning that would force everyone's hands.